In a vast and prosperous kingdom, where towering castles kissed the clouds and sprawling fields stretched as far as the eye could see, life moved to the rhythm of tradition and order. The people lived under the watchful eyes of their rulers, who governed with strict laws designed to maintain peace and stability. Among these enforcers of justice were the royal guards, a group of men and women clad in gleaming armor, their presence both awe-inspiring and intimidating. They were symbols of authority, tasked with upholding the king's decrees and ensuring that no one disrupted the delicate balance of society. Captain Alaric was among the most respected members of the royal guard. With his tall stature, piercing gaze, and unwavering dedication to duty, he commanded respect wherever he went. He had spent years honing his skills, not just in combat, but also in leadership. To many, he was the perfect embodiment of what a guard should be: disciplined, fair, and unyielding. Yet beneath his polished exterior lay a man deeply committed to protecting the kingdom and its people. Alaric believed wholeheartedly in the system he served, trusting that the laws existed for the greater good. The marketplace was the heart of the kingdom, a vibrant hub of activity where merchants shouted praises of their wares, children darted through crowded alleys, and the aroma of freshly baked bread mingled with the scent of exotic spices. It was here that Alaric often patrolled, ensuring that everything ran smoothly. On this particular morning, the sun hung high in the sky, casting golden rays over the bustling scene. Vendors called out to potential customers, bartering and laughing, while farmers unloaded carts filled with produce. The energy was infectious, a testament to the prosperity of the land. But amidst the cheerful chaos, there were always whispers of discontent. Not everyone thrived under the kingdom's rigid rules. For some, life was a constant struggle against hunger, poverty, and despair. These troubles rarely surfaced openly, hidden behind forced smiles or quiet resignation. Still, Alaric remained vigilant, knowing that even the smallest spark of unrest could ignite into something far more dangerous if left unchecked. As he walked through the narrow pathways between stalls, his sharp eyes scanned the crowd. Most people avoided meeting his gaze, lowering their heads respectfully or stepping aside to let him pass. Children paused mid-play to stare at the imposing figure, their curiosity tempered by a healthy dose of fear. Merchants greeted him politely, eager to demonstrate their compliance with the law. Everything seemed normal, until a commotion near the fruit vendor's stall caught his attention. A shrill voice cut through the noise, rising above the hum of conversation and clatter of goods. Alaric turned to see an elderly woman standing beside a pile of bruised apples, her face flushed with anger. Her ragged clothes spoke of hardship, and her hands trembled as she gestured wildly at another merchant. The argument grew louder, drawing a small crowd of onlookers who watched with a mix of fascination and unease. Something about the woman's demeanor intrigued Alaric. She didn't cower like others might when confronted with conflict. Instead, she stood her ground, her voice laced with raw emotion. Little did he know, this encounter would challenge everything he thought he knew about justice, authority, and humanity. As Captain Alaric approached the commotion, his boots clicked against the cobblestones, drawing the attention of the gathered crowd. The elderly woman's voice was sharp and unyielding as she argued with a fruit vendor, her words laced with frustration. "You think you can cheat me because I'm old. I may be poor, but I'm not blind," she shouted, pointing an accusing finger at the merchant. Her face was flushed, her gray hair escaping from beneath her scarf in wild wisps. The vendor, a stout man with a red face, held up his hands defensively, though his expression betrayed guilt rather than innocence. The crowd murmured amongst themselves, some siding with the woman, others dismissing her as a troublemaker. Alaric stepped forward, his presence immediately commanding silence. His deep voice cut through the tension like a blade. "What is the meaning of this disturbance?" he asked, his tone firm but measured. The vendor quickly began explaining, stammering over his words. "Captain, this woman accused me of selling rotten apples. But that's not true. She refused to pay and started causing the scene. Before Alaric could respond, the elderly woman turned her fiery gaze on him. Her eyes, though tired, burned with defiance. "And what business is it of yours, guard?" she snapped, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Are you here to take his side without even hearing mine?" Her boldness startled the onlookers. Few dared to speak to a member of the royal guard with such disrespect. Alaric raised an eyebrow, surprised by her audacity, but intrigued all the same. "I am here to ensure fairness," he replied calmly. "Tell me your side." The woman hesitated for a moment, as if weighing whether to trust him. Then, with a deep breath, she launched into her story. She claimed that the apples she had purchased were indeed rotten, unfit for consumption. When she tried to return them, the vendor refused, insisting she had damaged them herself. Her protests fell on deaf ears, and when she attempted to leave without paying, the vendor accused her of theft. "I've done nothing wrong," she declared, her voice rising again. "But no one listens to someone like me, a poor widow trying to survive." Alaric studied her carefully, noting the weariness etched into her face and the frayed edges of her shawl. There was desperation in her stance, a heaviness that spoke of years of hardship. Yet there was also fire, an indomitable spirit that refused to bow, even in the face of authority. For a brief moment, he felt a pang of sympathy. But before he could say anything further, the woman's emotions boiled over. Whether it was exhaustion, anger, or sheer frustration, something snapped inside her. With startling speed, she leaned forward and spat directly into Alaric's face. The crowd gasped in unison, their collective shock rippling through the marketplace like a wave. No one moved, no one spoke. Time seemed to freeze as the saliva trickled down Alaric's cheek. His hand instinctively twitched toward the hilt of his sword, and for a fleeting second, the onlookers braced themselves for punishment. Would he strike her down, arrest her on the spot, publicly humiliate her in return? But instead of reacting with violence, Alaric stood still, his jaw tightening as he processed what had just happened. He reached up slowly, wiping his face with the back of his gloved hand. His piercing eyes locked onto hers, searching for answers behind her act of defiance. What he saw wasn't malice or rebellion, it was pain. Raw, unfiltered pain. And perhaps something else. A plea for help disguised as hostility. For the first time in his career, Alaric found himself questioning the role he played in this kingdom. Was he truly there to serve justice, or was he merely enforcing rules that sometimes hurt those they were meant to protect? The weight of the moment pressed down on him, heavy and undeniable. The marketplace remained silent, every pair of eyes fixed on the standoff between the proud guard and the defiant widow. Whatever happened next would leave a lasting impression, not just on Alaric, but on everyone who witnessed it. The silence in the marketplace was deafening. Every breath, every shuffle of feet, seemed magnified as all eyes remained fixed on Captain Alaric and the elderly woman. His gloved hand lingered near his cheek, the dampness from her act still lingering. For a moment, it felt as though the entire world had stopped spinning. Time itself held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Alaric's mind raced. He could feel the weight of the crowd's expectations pressing down on him. They were watching, judging, anticipating how a man of his rank and authority would respond to such blatant disrespect. In their eyes, he represented not just himself, but the entire system of law and order that governed their lives. To strike back or punish her severely would be expected. It was what many believed justice demanded. Yet something inside him hesitated. He looked at the woman again, really looked at her this time. Her chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, her fists clenched tightly at her sides. There was fire in her gaze, yes, but also vulnerability, a flicker of fear hidden beneath layers of anger and defiance. She wasn't trembling out of weakness. She was trembling because she had nothing left to lose. This realization struck Alaric like a thunderclap. He saw not an enemy before him, but a person pushed to the brink by circumstances far beyond her control. Slowly, deliberately, Alaric lowered his hand from his face. Without saying a word, he reached into his belt pouch and pulled out a clean cloth. The crowd murmured softly, confused by his calm demeanor. Instead of barking orders or demanding retribution, he began wiping his cheek methodically, his movements steady and unhurried. It was as if he wanted to signal to everyone present, including the woman herself, that he wasn't going to react impulsively. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a quiet authority that silenced even the faintest whispers. "Why did you do it?" he asked simply, his tone devoid of accusation. It wasn't the question anyone expected. Most assumed he would demand an apology or issue a stern rebuke. But this was different. His words weren't those of a superior addressing a subordinate. They were those of one human being seeking to understand another. The woman blinked, caught off guard by the gentleness in his voice. For a fleeting second, her defenses wavered. Then, almost instinctively, she straightened her posture, her pride refusing to let her appear weak. "What does it matter why I did it?" she shot back, though her voice lacked the venom of before. "You wouldn't care anyway." Alaric tilted his head slightly, studying her expression. "Try me," he said softly, surprising even himself with the sincerity in his tone. He took a step closer, closing some of the distance between them. Though his armor gleamed under the sunlight, making him seem larger than life, his body language conveyed no threat, only curiosity. This small gesture seemed to disarm her further, though she fought hard to hide it. The tension in the air began to shift. What had started as a confrontation now felt more like a conversation, one fraught with emotion but tinged with possibility. Some in the crowd exchanged glances, unsure how to interpret what they were witnessing. Others leaned forward ever so slightly, eager to hear what the woman might say next. For her part, the widow hesitated. Her lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. Years of hardship had taught her to keep her struggles locked away, hidden from prying eyes. Trusting someone, especially someone in uniform, felt dangerous, almost foolish. And yet, there was something about Alaric's demeanor that made her pause. Perhaps it was the absence of judgment in his gaze, or perhaps it was the simple fact that he had asked, not demanded, to know her story. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she exhaled sharply and muttered, "Fine. If you want to know so badly, listen closely." Her voice was quieter now, tinged with resignation rather than rage. As she prepared to share her tale, Alaric nodded encouragingly, signaling that he was ready to hear her out. In that moment, something remarkable happened, not just for the two individuals standing face to face, but for everyone watching. A crack appeared in the rigid wall of authority and obedience that defined their society. Compassion, however fleeting, had entered the equation. And while neither Alaric nor the woman realized it yet, this single act of restraint would ripple outward, touching lives far beyond the confines of the marketplace. The woman took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging slightly as if the weight of years had finally caught up with her. For a moment, she looked smaller, more fragile than before. The fire in her eyes dimmed, replaced by a profound sadness that seemed to echo through the silent marketplace. Alaric stood patiently, his arms relaxed at his sides, his expression open and attentive. He didn't interrupt or rush her. Instead, he gave her the space to speak, a rare gift for someone like her. "My name is Melis," she began, her voice softer now, but still carrying an edge of bitterness. "I used to have a family once, a husband who worked hard, a son who fought for this kingdom, and grandchildren who brought light into my life." She paused, swallowing hard as though the memories were too painful to summon easily. But that was before everything changed. Her story unfolded haltingly, each word heavy with emotion. She explained how her husband had passed away years ago, leaving her to fend for herself. Her son, eager to provide for the family, joined the army in service to the crown. At first, his letters home were filled with hope and promises of better days ahead. But then came the war, a brutal conflict that claimed countless lives, including his. When news of his death reached Melis, It shattered what little remained of her world. After he died, they sent us nothing. No support, no help, just empty words about honor and sacrifice. Her voice cracked, and she clenched her fists tightly to steady herself. And then came the taxes, more and more every year, taking what little we had left. How am I supposed to feed my grandchildren when even bread feels like a luxury? Melis gestured toward the bruised apples on the ground, her hands trembling with frustration. Those fruits. That's all I could afford today. And even then, only because I sold one of my last decent shawls. Do you think I spat in your face just to be rude? No. I did it because I'm tired. Tired of being ignored. Tired of begging for scraps, while others live comfortably without lifting a finger. Her words hung in the air, sharp and unrelenting, cutting deeper than any blade ever could. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, some averting their gaze while others exchanged uneasy glances. Many of them knew people like Melis, people who struggled silently, whose suffering went unnoticed until it erupted in moments like this. Alaric listened intently, his brow furrowed as he absorbed every detail. His training hadn't prepared him for this kind of confrontation, for hearing firsthand how the very system he upheld failed those it was meant to protect. He thought of the laws he enforced daily, the rules designed to maintain order and prosperity. Yet here was Melis, living proof that not everyone benefited from that so-called prosperity. As tears welled up in her eyes, Melis added bitterly, "You guards, you walk around in your shiny armor, thinking you're untouchable. You see people like me as problems to solve or criminals to punish. But do you ever stop to ask why we act the way we do? Why we fight back when everything else has been taken from you?" Her question struck Alaric like a hammer blow. He realized now that her defiance wasn't born out of malice, but desperation. She wasn't attacking him personally. She was lashing out at a system that had crushed her spirit and left her with nothing. It wasn't about pride. It was about survival. For the first time in his career, Alaric felt the burden of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. He couldn't undo the hardships Melis had endured, nor could he erase the pain etched into her weathered face. But he could listen, and perhaps, just perhaps, he could do something to make things right. Not just for her, but for others like her. When Melis finished speaking, her voice barely above a whisper, the marketplace remained eerily quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, Alaric nodded, his expression softening. "Thank you," he said simply, surprising both Melis and the crowd. "Thank you for telling me the truth." In that moment, something shifted between them. The hostility dissolved, replaced by a fragile understanding. Though neither of them knew it yet, this exchange would mark the beginning of change, not just in their own lives, but in the lives of countless others who had long been forgotten by the kingdom they called home. That night, Captain Alaric found himself unable to sleep. The image of Melis's tear-streaked face haunted him, her words replaying over and over in his mind like a relentless echo. He sat by the dim light of a single candle in his modest quarters, staring at the flickering flame as if it held answers to questions he hadn't fully formed yet. For years, he had prided himself on being the guardian of justice, a man who upheld the law without question, believing it was the foundation of peace and order. But now doubt crept into his thoughts, gnawing at the edges of his certainty. How could he have missed this? How could the kingdom's laws, designed to protect and provide, leave someone like Melis struggling so desperately? She wasn't an exception. She was a reflection of something deeper, something broken within the system itself. Alaric realized with growing unease that he had been blind to the cracks beneath the polished surface of their society. His duty had always felt clear-cut. Enforce the rules, maintain control. But what good were rules if they failed those they were meant to serve? Determined to act, Alaric rose before dawn, donning his armor with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Instead of heading to the palace or patrolling the streets, he made his way to the marketplace where he'd encountered Melis the day before. The early morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of baked goods from nearby stalls just beginning to open for the day. As he approached the spot where their confrontation had taken place, he spotted her sitting on a low wooden bench, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Melis looked up as he neared, her expression wary but not hostile. "What do you want?" she asked sharply, though there was less venom in her tone than before. Alaric knelt down in front of her, removing his helmet to show he came in sincerity. "I wanted to apologize," he said simply, his voice steady but sincere. Her eyes widened slightly in surprise, unsure whether to believe him. "For what?" she muttered, folding her arms across her chest defensively. "You didn't steal my apples or raise my taxes." "No," Alaric admitted, "but I represent a system that did. And for that, I'm sorry." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I also brought you something." From a sack slung over his shoulder, he pulled out loaves of bread, fresh cheese, and a small bundle of dried fruits. Melis stared at the food, her throat tightening as emotion welled up inside her. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Because no one should go hungry, not in this kingdom," Alaric replied firmly. "And because I owe it to you, and others like you, to do better." He hesitated for a moment, then added, "There's more. If you're willing, I can arrange for you to work in the palace kitchens. It's not much, but it will ensure you have steady meals and a roof over your head." Melis blinked rapidly, tears spilling down her cheeks despite her efforts to hold them back. For so long she had fought alone, convinced that no one cared about her plight. Now here was this man, a royal guard, of all people, offering her not just aid but dignity. "Why would you help me after what I did?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Because everyone deserves a second chance," Alaric said gently. "And because your courage reminded me of something important. That true strength lies in compassion, not authority." Overwhelmed, Melis nodded slowly, accepting his offer. As Alaric helped her gather the food and escorted her toward the palace, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Helping one person wouldn't fix everything. It wouldn't erase the hardships faced by countless others. But it was a start. A spark of change, however small, had been lit. And sometimes, all it took was a single act of kindness to set the world on a different path. Word of what happened between Captain Alaric and Melis spread faster than wildfire through dry grass. By midday, the story had reached every corner of the kingdom, from the bustling marketplace to the quiet villages nestled in the countryside. People whispered about the elderly widow who dared to spit in the face of a royal guard, and the unexpected kindness he showed in return. Some dismissed it as an isolated incident, while others saw it as a sign of hope, a crack in the rigid walls of authority that had long seemed impenetrable. Among the guards themselves, opinions were divided. Some criticized Alaric for showing leniency, arguing that such actions undermined their authority and invited chaos. "If we start bending the rules for one person, where does it end?" grumbled a veteran guard during their evening briefing. Others, however, admired his restraint and compassion. A younger recruit named Callum spoke up hesitantly, saying, "Maybe it's not about bending the rules. It's about understanding why people break them in the first place." Alaric listened quietly to the debate, letting his men voice their thoughts without interruption. When the room finally fell silent, he stood and addressed them with calm resolve. "Our duty isn't just to enforce laws," he began, his deep voice carrying weight. "It's to protect the people, to ensure they feel safe and valued under our watch. If someone lashes out, maybe it's because they've been ignored for too long. We can't fix everything overnight, but we can choose how we respond. Will we be feared, or will we be trusted?" His words resonated deeply with some of the younger guards, planting seeds of change within the ranks. Slowly but surely, small shifts began to take root. Guards started patrolling with more empathy, taking time to listen when disputes arose instead of resorting immediately to punishment. In the marketplace, vendors noticed the difference. Arguments over prices or stolen goods were handled with fairness rather than force. Even the harshest critics couldn't deny that tensions between the people and the royal guard began to ease. Meanwhile, Melis settled into her new role in the palace kitchens. At first, she kept mostly to herself, wary of drawing attention or causing trouble. But as days turned into weeks, her natural warmth and resilience began to shine through. She shared stories of her late son's bravery with the cooks and scullery maids, inspiring them with tales of sacrifice and love. Her laughter became a familiar sound in the kitchen, brightening even the longest days. The palace staff grew fond of her, affectionately calling her Grandmother Melis, despite her insistence that she was far too young for such a title. The ripple effects of Alaric's decision extended beyond the walls of the palace. Inspired by his example, some merchants in the marketplace began offering discounts to struggling families, while others set aside bruised fruits and vegetables for those who couldn't afford fresh produce. It wasn't charity. It was solidarity, a recognition that everyone deserved a chance to survive and thrive. Even the king took notice. Word reached him of Alaric's actions and the subtle changes sweeping through the kingdom. Intrigued, he summoned the captain to the throne room one afternoon. Alaric stood tall before the monarch, prepared to defend his choices if necessary. To his surprise, the king leaned back in his chair, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "Tell me, Captain," he said after a pause, "do you believe this softer approach is sustainable, or will it weaken the foundation of our rule?" Alaric met the king's gaze without hesitation. "Your Majesty, I believe true strength lies in earning the trust of your people, not in demanding their obedience through fear. Laws exist to serve them, not the other way around. If we adapt to their needs while maintaining order, we build loyalty that no army can guarantee." The king studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps you're right. Let us see where this path leads." With that, he dismissed Alaric, leaving him with a sense of cautious optimism. Change wouldn't come overnight, but the cracks in the old system were widening. And through them, light was beginning to seep in. As months passed, the kingdom transformed in subtle yet profound ways. The relationship between the guards and the common folk shifted from one of fear to mutual respect. And though challenges remained, there was a newfound sense of unity, a shared belief that justice and compassion could coexist. For the first time in years, the people felt heard. And that perhaps was the greatest victory of all. Years passed, and the ripple effects of that fateful day in the marketplace continued to shake the kingdom in ways no one could have predicted. Melis, once a symbol of quiet defiance, became a beloved figure within the palace walls. Her presence brought warmth and wisdom to the kitchens, where she shared not only recipes but also stories of resilience and hope. The younger staff members adored her, often gathering around after their duties were done to listen as she recounted tales of her late son's courage and the lessons she had learned through hardship. But it wasn't just her storytelling that left an impact. It was her unwavering belief in the goodness of people, even when life seemed determined to prove her wrong. She encouraged those around her to look beyond appearances, to see the struggles others might be hiding beneath forced smiles or angry words. "Everyone carries burdens," she would say, stirring a pot of stew with steady hands. "Sometimes, all it takes is a little kindness to lighten the load." Meanwhile, Alaric's reputation soared. His actions on behalf of Melis and the reforms he championed among the royal guard earned him widespread respect. He rose through the ranks steadily, eventually becoming commander of the royal guard. Under his leadership, the guards adopted a new philosophy, justice tempered with compassion. They began hosting regular meetings with townsfolk to address grievances, ensuring that voices long ignored were finally heard. Punishments for minor offenses were reduced, replaced by opportunities for offenders to contribute positively to the community. These changes didn't come easily. Some resisted fiercely, clinging to the old ways. But over time, the benefits became undeniable. The transformation extended far beyond the guards. Merchants who had once exploited the poor now offered fair prices, knowing that trust fostered loyalty. Farmers donated surplus crops to families struggling to make ends meet. Even the king, inspired by Alaric's vision, introduced policies aimed at easing the tax burden on widows and veterans' families. Slowly but surely, the kingdom shifted from a place governed by fear to one rooted in mutual respect and understanding. Melis witnessed these changes firsthand, marveling at how much had been accomplished since that tense moment in the marketplace. One evening, as she sat by the hearth in the servants' quarters, knitting a scarf for one of her grandchildren, Alaric visited her unexpectedly. Now older and grayer, he carried himself with the same quiet dignity that had first caught her attention years ago. "You've changed this kingdom more than you know," he said, taking the seat beside her. His tone was warm, filled with genuine admiration. "Your courage reminded me, and so many others, that laws exist to serve people, not the other way around." Melis chuckled softly, shaking her head. "It wasn't my courage, Captain. It was desperation. I had nothing left to lose." She paused, looking at him with eyes that still held traces of fire. "But you chose to listen. That's what made the difference." Alaric smiled, humbled by her words. "And because I listened, I learned. From you, from others like you. I learned that true strength lies not in power but in empathy. We protect best when we understand, not just enforce." Their conversation lingered long after Alaric took his leave, leaving Melis lost in thought. She realized then that their encounter hadn't just changed the kingdom, it had changed them both. Alaric had become a leader defined by compassion rather than authority, while she had rediscovered a sense of purpose she thought lost forever. Together, they had sparked something extraordinary, a movement toward unity and fairness that transcended generations. As the years rolled on, Melis remained a fixture in the palace, her stories inspiring countless lives. Alaric, too, continued to serve with humility and resolve, proving that leadership wasn't about commanding fear, but earning trust. Their bond, a testament to the power of understanding and redemption, became legend, whispered about in marketplaces and sung about in taverns. And though neither sought recognition, their legacy endured, etched into the hearts of those whose lives they touched. Through them, the kingdom learned a timeless lesson, that even the smallest acts of humanity could ignite monumental change, bridging divides and healing wounds thought irreparable. Decades passed, and the kingdom continued to flourish under the principles of justice and compassion that Alaric and Melis had helped instill. The once rigid system of laws evolved into something more humane, reflecting the needs and struggles of its people. What began as a single act of defiance in a crowded marketplace had grown into a cultural shift, a transformation so profound that future generations would look back on it with awe. One crisp autumn morning, long after both Alaric and Melis had passed away, a ceremony was held in the heart of the bustling marketplace. A statue stood unveiled before an eager crowd, its bronze surface gleaming under the golden sunlight. It depicted two figures, one clad in the armor of a royal guard, extending a hand toward a humble woman wrapped in a tattered shawl. Their expressions were neither triumphant nor angry, but filled with quiet understanding, a testament to the moment when authority met humanity. Beneath the statue, an inscription read, "Justice without compassion is tyranny. Strength without understanding is weakness." These words, chosen by scholars and historians who studied the era, captured the essence of what Alaric and Melis had taught the kingdom. They reminded everyone who read them that true power lay not in domination, but in connection, that even those tasked with enforcing rules must never forget the faces behind them. The story of Melis and Alaric became legend, woven into the fabric of the kingdom's identity. Parents told their children about the brave widow who dared to challenge authority, and the compassionate guard who listened instead of punishing. Teachers used their tale to illustrate lessons on empathy, resilience, and the importance of questioning systems that fail to serve all equally. Artists painted murals depicting their encounter, poets penned verses celebrating their courage, and musicians composed songs that echoed through village squares. But perhaps the most enduring legacy was the change they inspired within ordinary citizens. People began to see themselves differently, as active participants in shaping their society, rather than passive subjects subject to its whims. When disputes arose, neighbors resolved them through dialogue rather than violence. When someone faltered under life's burdens, others stepped forward to help, knowing that tomorrow it could be them in need. The spirit of cooperation replaced division, fostering a sense of unity that strengthened the kingdom from within. In time, neighboring lands took notice of this remarkable transformation. Diplomats arrived seeking wisdom, eager to learn how such harmony had been achieved. Scholars documented the reforms initiated during Alaric's tenure, while leaders marveled at the balance struck between order and compassion. The kingdom became a beacon of hope, a living example of what could be accomplished when authority served not just itself, but the greater good. Yet for all the accolades and admiration, the true measure of success lay in the everyday lives of the people. Farmers worked their fields without fear of crippling taxes. Merchants traded fairly, knowing trust built stronger bonds than greed. And children played freely in the streets, secure in the knowledge that their voices mattered. The marketplace, the very place where it all began, remained vibrant and alive, a symbol of resilience and renewal. As the sun set on the day of the statue's unveiling, an elderly woman paused before it, her eyes misty with tears. She had been a young girl when Malus worked in the palace kitchens, often sneaking away from her chores to listen to the old widow's stories. Now gray-haired and stooped with age, she placed a bouquet of wildflowers at the base of the monument. "Thank you," she whispered softly, her voice carrying the weight of gratitude spanning generations. And so, the legacy of Malus and Alaric lived on, not just in statues or inscriptions, but in hearts and minds. Their story served as a reminder that even in moments of conflict and despair, there exists the potential for growth and healing. It taught that humility and courage, though seemingly opposite, could coexist, and that sometimes the smallest acts of humanity carried the power to change the world.